everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. We are living in an absolutely wild time. And I mean, AI is changing. And if you don't understand what you're looking at, how do you know if it's going to do you any good? I need experts. And I have two experts today that I rely on. And I'm telling you right now, Mark Stansberry is a friend of the show. He has been on the podcast and he has written a book, America Needs Energy and Its Natural Resources. Thank you, Mark, for stopping by today.
It's great to be with you, Stu. Appreciate this.
And we've gotten John Brewton. John Brewton is the founder and CEO. He is a United States Air Force vet, MBA, went to Harvard Business School, and he is the founder and CEO of Data Squared. Welcome, John. How are you today?
Very good, sir. Thank you for the time. Look forward to the conversation.
I'll tell you, we've had a little warm-up discussion here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. But Mark, you were promoted, I guess, or made a advisor to the CEO, John Brewton. Tell us about that.
Well, I had a mutual friend, that introduced me to Data Squared that was in the technology world as well. And so, having been in the oil and gas business for around 48 years, AI, like you're talking about, Stu, is a new venture and really exciting for someone like myself. And at this stage of my life, I'm excited about the future of energy, and AI is going to be a big part of that. So I had the opportunity to team up with Data Squared and John Brewton, who's the CEO, strategic advisor to the CEO, John Brewton. That's JONBREWTON. And his company has 4 partners that are from the military background, but also have unbelievable experience in the energy front. And I will let John, if he will, tell more about where it began and his journey as well. I think that's important, Stu.
Oh, you bet.
To hear about that, because it's one thing to have the background that I have and of course that you have as well, but to now be placed in front of this AI I get calls all the time now about data centers, about how we can incorporate AI. And I can't think of any other company or person that could lead this discussion than John. So, John, if you will, the floor is yours, if that's all right, Stu.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks for the kind introduction there, Mark. Yeah, I'm John Brewton, founder and CEO of Data Squared. I'll give you a quick intro to the company and kind of how we got to where we are and what we're up to at the moment. We founded Data Squared in September of 2023 with a vision to build a world where people and machines could make smarter decisions together. Our team, as alluded to previously, includes co-founders Chris Rohrbach, who's a former Navy SEAL commander, retired after 26 years. I saved him from a life of being probably a Fox News commentator or something else, given his background. He's a fairly decorated war hero. We ended up spending a lot of time together doing our MBA together. And so once I decided to start a company, I called Chris and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking for a job. I'm about to retire." I said, "I got one for you." So we started a company together with another friend of ours, Eric Costantini, who's a Marine Corps veteran. And Eric and I actually studied together at Harvard Business School.
Nice.
And we also have our fourth founder, who's Jeff Dalgleish. Jeff is a oil and gas industry veteran, 30 years. Jeff started training logistics dispatchers on rigs on how to schedule things in the Gulf of Thailand. That was his first experience working for Unocal. Ooh. And ended up running the entire upstream data and really sort of IT infrastructure for Chevron for a long time. So Jeff and I worked together at Chevron for several years. And Jeff left Chevron a little bit before I did, started a different company. It was based on knowledge graphs. They were trying to attack how to build knowledge systems, aggregated intelligence systems for oil and gas. And they could never really figure out how to operationalize it because it's pretty hard to build and it's pretty hard to operationalize. And I'll talk about why that's important in just a moment. My personal background, U.S. Air Force veteran, spent time with both BP and Chevron, 18 years in the industry, worked everywhere in the world, I think, but Antarctica, kind of lived everywhere as well. Worked everything from an upstream to midstream perspective. I did basically everything: production engineering, drilling engineering, facilities engineering, strategy, acquisitions, divestitures, production ops, like everything during my career. So my career in oil and gas is a little bit different. It wasn't limited to one function or one type of role. I ended up doing a lot of different things. And there was a common problem that I faced, regardless of what I was doing, where I was working, what I was working on very specifically, was this sort of disconnected nature of intelligence within our industry. Everything is very functionally siloed at times, very hard to sort of connect
Yes.
in many instances. And depending on which company you're working for, you might have good relationships with your functional partners and you might not, depending on how the organizations are set up. And so we kind of took our experiences from the oil and gas industry and our experiences from the intelligence space in DoD and the US government and tried to figure out how we could take a different approach to solving problems. And it started with, how can we aggregate intelligence in a really meaningful way so that we can connect things across these silos in a really easy and really quick fashion? That was kind of the first idea that we had. But we started having discussions about how to build this company out right as we got to the release of the first ChatGPT model. And again, timeline wise, I said, hey, we started the company in September 2023. Well, I think hit commercial availability where people could get subscriptions in March of 23. And so we were trying to figure out how to aggregate intelligence in a really smart way, how we could make that easy for people, and then how we could use some of these new capabilities that were on the market to build better tools and discover a better way to bring information together and to do analytics and to create a collaborative environment over the intelligence that we gather. And it turns out that Jeff's experience trying to build a knowledge graph company, my experience trying to commercialize that company inside of Chevron, and our experience with these tools just in terms of AI and machine learning led us to picking a very good data model that interfaced with large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, in a way that solves for really sort of three problems. One, you have problems associated to hallucinated content. The way that these systems work, they tend to deliver an answer regardless of whether or not they have the right materials to actually provide that answer.
Right.
Because they work on a decision imperative, which is an objective function to produce an answer.
Yep.
That creates a little bit of a lack of trust. These systems themselves are not inherently multimodal. And what I mean by that is we can't take spreadsheets and photos and written logs and any other sort of intelligence that we have, PDF documents, and put them in the same place and pass those to a large language model without it breaking. It just doesn't work whenever you pass that sort of information over. And so we really tried to figure out how we could take the rigorous demands of what are these high stakes industries, both defense, intelligence, and then the oil and gas industry, and design something that would make it easy and make it fast and make it hallucination free, fully transparent, fully trustworthy, and explainable, because that's really what's going to be required if we're going to use it as an engineering assistant or if we're going to use it in an intelligence capacity. That's kind of how we started. And we used our experience from these really interesting domains that don't sound like they would be connected very, very much. The intelligence organization, say like the CIA, actually in practical application looks a whole hell of a lot like Chevron internally. And so taking sort of these best practices from these different places and coming up with a new approach, that's how we got started. And I think we're doing some pretty interesting things.
This is very critical because the disparate business systems that are in the oil and gas space are archaic and very painful. And when you're looking at deal evaluations, or we're looking at oil and gas flows, we're saying, hey, what are the offsetting wells? And I'm trying to evaluate, is this a good investment or is this a bad investment? I have to have data. It costs me a lot of money if I don't. Let's take, just as an example, Grok, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
I like it as a tool, but boy, you got to be careful, because you mentioned that earlier, that if systems have dreams, or how did you phrase it? I love the way you
hallucinations.
phrased it. Hallucinations. Thank you. Kind of like my ex-wife. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. Some of the questions, some of it is absolutely phenomenal, but you got to understand enough of the material to go, wait a minute, I see something wrong. Let me drill a little bit into this. How have you been able to stop the grokism, if you would?
Yeah, it's a perfectly fine way to say it for me. Like in general, like all these systems suffer from similar issues. And there was a great Wall Street Journal article, I think it was Wall Street Journal, a couple of days ago, really got into the scale of these issues and some of the problems that folks were seeing. Sorry, it was a New York Times article. And the headline of this is AI is getting more powerful, but hallucinations are getting worse. A new wave of reasoning systems for companies like OpenAI is producing incorrect information more often. Even companies don't know why. And I don't want to get into why it happens because there's a lot of technicality behind how these systems are built, how they work, and how they do what they do, which is irrelevant. All you need to know is that this problem persists, whether it's Grok or OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, or if you built a model yourself internally, it wouldn't matter because of the way that they're built to actually produce the answers that they do. So we figured that out really early on. We figured it out in quite honestly about April of 2023. Even before we started the company, we figured out that one, there's some inherent problems associated to what is sort of happening with these systems. And if we prepared data in the right way, we could not only use multiple modes of data, PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and visual representations of things simultaneously, but we could do it in a way where we could ground those models in the reality that we provided. So a lot of the problems that they face are from drift, because they work on human language. So whenever we ask a question, the value of the answer that is provided is really determined by the words that we use, because it looks into the words that we use and it tries to connect it to the information it was trained on. Now, some of these things are very domain specific. As you know, there's probably 100 words in the English language that are repurposed for other things in the oil field. We could probably go down a laundry list right now. Or Texas, where I'm 100%. Louisiana's probably got us beat. But, there's this really weird thing that happens where these systems try to derive context from the words that we use. And so a lot of people think if we just use more words when we prompt these systems, or we're more detailed in the way that we say stuff, that it'll help. And it's not true. It kind of works on a bell curve. The less words you use, the higher likelihood of failure. The more words you use, the higher likelihood of failure. Somewhere in the middle is a bit of a sweet spot. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is a scalability problem. If we as an industry, especially, this is a high reliability industry. If we make mistakes here and we're using these tools, it can cost people their lives. And to your earlier point, it can cost us a lot of money. So we need to know that these things are working correctly. So that's how we kind of started. That's the imperative we started trying to build around. And we figured out that if we prepare data in the right way and we provide it to these systems in a different manner than a traditional sort of question in natural language, that we can essentially fix the way that they see the universe to that data. And so we can tell these systems, okay, here's the world as you need to understand it. This is the world that you need to understand. You don't need to think about anything else. You don't need to try to make up anything beyond what we provided you. You can use the stuff that you were trained on to inform how you answer this question, but you can't use anything from your training interjected into the answer that you provide. So that's a bit of the kind of workflow for us. And the analogy is when we prepare data and we submit it to a large language model, we're essentially putting a puzzle together. We take a 1,000-piece puzzle and we put it together and we present it in that format to these models and say, here is the world. Here's how it's connected. Here's why it's connected. And this really helps us to define the who's, the what's, the whens, and the wheres. And so when we start asking questions, we can quickly get to and ascertain the hows and the whys associated to anything.
This is cool. Now, let me ask a real world business scenario. Let's take 1,500 pads over at BHP. And these 1,500 pads have a great SCADA system. They've absolutely been connected. We know their well log history and we know everything else. And then they're being sold from BHP to Pioneer, somebody else. Well, the one over here is running solar winds and they're running their databases and
Yeah.
everything else. So, am I asking a question for some of your potential future customers? Would they be
Yeah.
able to take data squared and say, I've got disparate business systems and I want to connect this SCADA data over here to this program over here and take a look at a completely different W operating accounting software and look at it over here?
I swear to God, we didn't prepare this question in advance. You
It,
teed me up in a great way.
okay,
So
it's because I've
yeah,
been around.
yeah. Well, part of the reason we built what we built was to solve that exact problem. Just full
Wow.
stop. That's
Wow.
the problem
So
we
this is
built to
not going
solve.
to be the worst podcast you've ever been on. Then I've got to
Not yet.
this.
Not yet. There's still a ways to go. No,
Okay.
no. But no, look, in our industry, there's such a problem with abstraction in sort of the disparate nature of information and how you can connect information. It's not easy. It's usually sort of in different formats within different systems, and you have to have crazy people that exist within the industry that will come hell or high water, make sure that I can connect this information in some way. And so you find these people that build these incredible Excel-based models that integrate pieces of equations from different places so they can try to figure out how to use information from a different place, abstracted to the problem that they're trying to solve now, and try to gain some relevancy and some context that will inform how we can solve problems in different ways using different information. And that's an industry problem because of the way that we're set up. Civitas is a great example of this. So, we've been working with Civitas for about a year now, and it started with a couple of different problem statements. It was, hey, we just bought 8 different companies in the last 2 years. And these 8 different companies, for the most part, had different reporting systems, had different contracts for the same services, had different permits, had different operating requirements, had different commercial agreements, had different parameters that they saw as value adding for the companies. And these assets were being operated in kind of different ways at the end of the day. And so Civitas said, can you just help us put this information together and try to figure out how it's connected and what it means? We understand from a top line perspective what we bought, but in a micro perspective, we don't understand really which asset is a key contributing factor to that top line and which ones aren't, and which ones are operating inefficiently and which ones aren't. And so they said, can you just pull this together for us? And we said, yeah, we'll do that. So we ended up scanning, I think, 386 boxes of legacy data and then harmonizing, say, about 15 different systems of well repository information together to build a unified and harmonized data model. Now, this data model consisted of about 6.6 million different points of data. And it was really geared around, can you just tell me from the perspective of, say, an accountant or an engineer, what this well is, what its contributions are, what it means to our profitability, how it aligns to our lease and how that's performing? Yeah, absolutely. So we built a tool where we could take any asset in this entire footprint. I think it's 1,862 wells, I think 242 surface facilities, a bunch of pipeline infrastructure, a bunch of midstream assets for, frac ponds, just kind of everything together, put it all together in one place, in one data model. And we built some tools where we could use AI to say, from the perspective or the persona of an accountant, can you please tell me what I need to know about this well or this facility? From the perspective of a drilling engineer, can you tell me what I need to know about this well or this facility?
Drilling engineer is going to want to know basically how soon it's going to come offline or how much water I got to put in. But yet a CEO is going to want to say to his investors as he's sitting there going, but here's what strip pricing is. By the way, if you give me money now, I'm going to be giving you more money back because I give money back to my shareholders. Yeah, I'm already in. I'm buying. Where do I sign? I'm buying. I'm ready. This is cool.
So I think that's problem one. Problem two was, hey, we bought some midstream assets and we've never run a midstream business. It doesn't mean that we don't know how, but inherently we'd like to understand, just as a general imperative, how can we optimize our disposal activities, reduce our total cost exposure, and increase our profitability, which gets to your point. right now at an asset or a management or an executive level. How can I be more productive and more profitable on a day-to-day basis with a new business entity that maybe we don't understand all that well? And so we built a tool on top of that to understand the entire performance history of these assets, their commercial state, what it meant for how they were operated in the past, how they were being operated sort of point forward from a planning perspective. We integrated the wells performance history from a production perspective, how fast we drill wells, how fast we complete wells, what that means for what we put on production, what our production curves look like, what our decline curves look like. Just this holistic understanding of all these really disparate parts of information that exist in every oil company, but are not connected in every oil company. And so we kind of put them together in a way where we could start to do value chain optimization across the state of Texas and New Mexico on demand. So if we wanted to look at any individual asset, we could say, we want to reduce our total cost by 10 cents per barrel on disposal in this area on a map. How can I do that? And then we built a system that would provide that answer, but not only provide that answer, provide the simulation background associated to it, all of the information that was used to leverage and answer that question, all the source files that are associated to what information was pulled in to leverage to answer this question, and just created